If we know our goal, we can optimize our way to lower entropy and to find the tools to achieve it faster, I think. We also can be more efficient in the process. Why we don't have access behind the scene of our physical reality, and it's excluded from the primary set of rules. And most people have to struggle to find a way to see the bigger picture. Wouldn't it be a more efficient way to lower entropy if everyone could just see on demand the bigger picture?
No, it actually wouldn't be. It would be a slower process. And the reason for that is that if you could grow up by using your intellect, by understanding things, if growing up was an intellectual process, then what you say would be true. Understanding, what's behind the scenes, what's behind the curtain. If you understood all that, well, then you'd be able to grow up more. If it were an intellectual process, but it isn't. So what would happen if you had all that understanding and didn't have to earn it, didn't have to grow up to be ready for it so that you could internalize it, is that people would game the system. They would say, okay, what we're supposed to be here is kind and gentle and caring about each other. So I'll act that way. At least when anybody's looking, I'll act that way. But that doesn't mean you're actually going to be that way. It doesn't mean you're going to change. It doesn't help you grow up any. It just tells you what the right answers are. It's like getting the answers. Does giving students, a set of the right answers for the test, help them get smarter? No, it helps them pass tests, but it doesn't actually help them learn anything. So by giving people the answers, you're not helping them grow up, because growing up is not an intellectual process. You just have to go through all the growth steps. You can't take a 6-year-old child and teach them how to grow up. You can take a 6-year-old child, and with enough browbeating, you can probably get them to act more grown up. But all you'll do is make them neurotic, because they're not being honest. They're not being who they are. They're pretending to be something else. They're living an image. All right. They're very polite. They say all those adultish things. You can train them to do that, but that's really not all that good for them unless they only have to do it like when company comes over, and otherwise you let them act like a child, do the things that 6-year-olds do. So you just can't push growing up. It has to happen from the inside out, and it's not an intellectual process. So rather than have a lot of people trying to game the system and look like they're grown up when they're not really grown up much, its process is that you start with no information, and then the choices you make are really representative of who you are. Your choices are authentic. You make a choice, and if that choice is to be angry, then that's authentic. That's you. That's the level at which you have evolved. And now you get repercussions. You get consequences from those choices. And that's really a much better schoolhouse than handing everybody the answers to all the tests. It's much better to have people be who they are and then get corrections by their feedback, get the consequences of, say, their anger, because anger just makes everything worse. And, then people end up being, like you say, struggling because of mostly their own ego and their own beliefs. That's what causes all their struggle. And that's the feedback for them to grow up. But it's honest. It's who they are. It's what they are. And then they get the consequences of being that way. And it doesn't make it really that difficult for people to get the bigger understanding. I mean, look at all of you people are here. You've all got a bigger understanding of the way the world works. And how much does that help you grow up? How many leaps and bounds have you made getting rid of fear because you have the intellectual understanding? Well, maybe some. It has helped because you've now taken it more seriously and you've thought about it more. But the reason you take it more seriously and thought about it more was because to get here, you had to already be interested. You had to have, the desire. In other words, you had to be ready. when you weren't ready and somebody mentioned about growing up and being kind and being love and big pictures and nature of reality, if you're not ready, you just blow all that stuff off. You're not interested. Try to explain that to people and they just change the subject or don't want to talk about it. If you're not interested, then you're not going to actually take it seriously, and it's not going to help you grow up. But when you are interested, when you are ready for it, then it's here. It's been around. I mean, there's probably 100,000 books out there that will help you see bigger pictures. You know, from the self-help to you know, philosophy, theology. There's lots of things that'll help you get bigger pictures. But you have to figure it out on your own, because growing up has to be something that you figure out on your own as you're ready. And one step leads to the next. So it's just not that helpful to let everybody have, let's say, a memory of all the things that they've done so that they can get a bigger perspective on what they've done. There's baggage that goes with that. If people had all their memories when they incarnate here, there would be too much memory. So then it would just have to be selectively pared down. Well, maybe you'd have the memory of just the last 5 incarnations. That's all. You know, even that would start to become burdensome. And the whole point of starting over in your incarnation without any intellectual information is you also don't get you don't bring over the ego and the fear, and you don't bring over the ego and the beliefs with you. You bring over a propensity for ego and beliefs because of your basic quality. But the old ego and the old beliefs that has you kind of locked in a corner, they go away. You get to start over. You may regenerate them next time, but you don't have to be trapped by them next time, because you leave those behind along with your other intellectual stuff. So pretty soon, if we kept our memories, we would have this trail of baggage that we'd have to deal with. It's not only about making right choices, but we'd have to dig ourselves out of the holes that we created in the previous incarnations. As it is, all we do is we take who we are, the quality we are, things happen, and we make choices relative to those things. We get feedback. Then we work with that until we become ready to go faster, ready to understand. We become seekers after truth and after the nature. You know, we want to understand the nature of our reality, and you know, what's the difference between right and wrong, and why is that difference there? We have these issues and these questions where we want to understand, and that makes us, quote unquote, ready. And now we start going over the internet, we start reading books, we start talking to other people, and we start learning and growing much more quickly than we were before, because now we're plugged in and aware of it. But until you're ready, plugging somebody in kind of artificially without them having to earn it or grow up to it just isn't that helpful. It makes them game the system. It's like giving them answers, you know, before they take the test. Oh, they'll make really good grades on the test, but they're not really learning anything. And when I say growing up, that means really learning it. So the students have to figure it out and understand it on their own. Giving them a lot of help in the intellectual track is not useful. Giving them some help in the intuitive track, system does that all the time, but not in the intellectual track, because the intuitive track is right into the being level of who they are. The intellectual track is right into their image of who they think they are or who they'd like to be.